Hosanna's Killerwinds podcast back again. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
We have got a special guest, returning special guest.
Yep.
A returning in-studio, now remote guest, Jace Elliot. Thanks for being here, man.
You bet. Happy to come.
Yep, so Jace is deer biologist for the state of Iowa.
Yep.
Say this every time we talk to Jace and or afterwards when we talk about Jace. Jace seems smarter than us.
Yes.
Much, much smarter. Sometimes when you talk to people, I've said this before, there's only a couple people, and I don't mean this in a braggadocious way. I've been using the word braggadocious a lot lately, by the way. I don't mean this in a braggadocious way, but there's only a couple people that I feel like when I talk to them, I'm like, man, you're way smarter than me. Jace is one. Scott Elrod's the other.
I thought you were pointing at me to
Oh,
say
no,
me.
no, definitely not you. No, you're like way down the ladder.
All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
All right.
Okay, so I'm really excited about this discussion today.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about kind of three things.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Jace here being the guy that probably has a lot of the facts that we're really interested to know and hopefully give us some answers to some questions. We really want to talk about the HUSH program in the state of Iowa. We really want to talk about a program that I think a lot of people don't even know about called the Deer Exchange Program, which is pretty awesome. And then at the end, the third part of it, I want to have a candid conversation about our opinions and perspective about why we deer hunt.
Yep.
We had a heated, I don't want to say heated.
It wasn't heated.
No, it wasn't heated.
It was just a good conversation.
It was a good conversation at lunch.
Yeah.
And I was like, we need to just cut this short because I really want Jace's unbiased, not even know what we're talking about, his perspective. Hopefully he can not only talk about it with the DNR hat on, but also just as a hunter himself.
Yeah.
But again, Jace, thanks a ton for being here, dude. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So let's just jump in.
Yeah.
Jace, it's up to you. We can just rapid fire questions at you, or if you want to talk a little bit about the HUSH program right off the bat, maybe that would be best, and then we can just kind of jump in with questions. But if you could talk a little bit about the Iowa HUSH program, kind of the history, and just give us some info about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, you bet. So the Iowa HUSH program stands for Help Us Stop Hunger. And it was the Iowa DNR's first program that was designed to help put venison, legally harvested deer meat into the hands of non-hunters, particularly Iowans in need.
Right.
So basically it's a program where we fund meat lockers, meat processors, to accept deer from hunters that are harvested illegally and allocate that meat basically into the food bank. So it's a partnership between the Iowa DNR, different meat processors, and the Food Bank of Iowa and their affiliates on the distribution end. So it's been around since 2003.
Okay.
We've seen a pretty big ebb and flow of locker participation, hunter participation. That corresponds with the harvest that we've seen in Iowa fluctuating as well, but it's still alive and well. There's still, this year, over 25, I believe the number's 28, lockers in, over a quarter of the counties in Iowa that would accept deer. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions further before I just keep
rambling, huh?
talking.
Yeah. Dude, this is like right up my alley because I'm a fat guy.
Yeah, you are.
I love my facts all the time. I think I need to get some book that when I just go to the bathroom, it's just a book about facts because I just love me some facts. So this is right up my alley. If you could talk a little bit about, you made a comment there about like the flow of participation, right? Like of the amount of deer that are being put into the program or, are being hushed each year and the amount of lockers. When it comes to how many deer, do you guys have an exact number of how many deer since 2003 have been submitted? Or I know last year, I thought I saw a stat. It was somewhere around last year. It was what? It was way bigger than that. 3,022 deer in the 23-24 season were donated.
That's right.
Equaled 530,000 meals, over 500,000 meals.
That's awesome.
Like that's awesome. Yeah, that's wild. But do you have a whole number? Like how many deer have been Like I found something on the Iowa Deer Art website that hadn't been updated since like a graph since like 2014, but at that time it said 63,000 over 63,000 deer processed, 10 million meals provided.
Wow.
And that,
That number would be much closer to 100,000 deer at this point. So probably close, probably in excess of 15 million meals. It's safe to say. Yeah, and unfortunately, we are seeing the program lose a little bit of steam in recent years, particularly after COVID. But yeah, we're working on finding out some reasons why, and we're aware of a lot of them as well.
Yeah, yeah. So what I feel like I hear, because again, 2003 was the year I graduated high school.
Yeah.
So I remember when Hush first started and being like, Hush, like what's Hush? You know what I mean? Like what is this program? How does this work? You know what I mean? And I feel like I've been a part of it since that long ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wondered when it officially actually started, but like I said, 2003 is the year that I'll never forget because that was the year I graduated high school.
Right.
But what I feel like I hear from meat lockers, because like you said, I feel like in the 2000s used to be a lot more lockers that did it. 99 counties in Iowa. There was Louis Meat Locker in Clear Lake that did Hush. There was S&S Locker in Osage that did Hush. When I lived in Ames and went to Iowa State, there was meat lockers all over the place. And now, for us in here in Clear Lake, Mason City, North Iowa, we have to drive to Elma Meat Locker, Deerfield, which is right near Elma, Clarion Meat Locker.
Right.
It gets to be farther away. It's not like there's just one or two like per county or just the town over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like what I've heard people say is, well, the state isn't giving us as much money. It doesn't make as much sense to process. Like, what do you feel like you're hearing, or why do you think that the number of lockers that are participating has dropped?
So there's a couple things that have happened since the time you're describing. And we have basically, we're able to say that there's less meat lockers in general than there were at that time.
Okay.
And there's also been sort of a shift in meat processing, at least in Iowa, that especially after COVID, that in a lot of cases has gone away from wild game processing, deer processing, and focusing more on domestics.
Yep.
You might remember that during the COVID pandemic, it was almost impossible to even get a deer processed, in Iowa and elsewhere, just because there was such a backlog of, livestock that needed to be processed. And in fact, a lot of those smaller processors that specialized in deer became inundated with, pigs, cattle, things that actually are more profitable, but were typically handled at a larger scale processing facility. So that changed the dynamics a little bit. And that's, I don't think, the root cause, but that is happening in the background. So it's important to keep in mind that when we're making comparisons of locker participation, that there's a general trend, I think, of less deer-focused meat lockers in general in Iowa. But you're right in that we have had a lot of lockers drop out in the last several years. We were, when I started in 2021, paying lockers $75 per deer.
Right.
And that money went for lockers basically accepting a field-dressed carcass, a field-dressed deer, and then skinning, boning, and grinding all of that meat into 2-pound packages that went to food banks.
Yep.
Now, that number at the time was quite a bit lower than what they would be charging for that service in a lot of cases just from hunters. So we did see some participation drop as a result. That the figure that we provide lockers now, that payment is now up to $95.
Okay.
And I think that we've retained some meat lockers, some important processing partners as a result.
Yeah.
But we are still hearing that it's below market rate. And it is, frankly speaking, there's a lot of lockers that are charging $150 to, process a whole carcass. And there's also a growing number of lockers that are only accepting boned meat.
Right.
And that's a big problem because the Hush program, requires a whole carcass.
Right.
Bone, height, and all.
Yep.
In order to participate. So that's a big struggle. I think the reason that lockers are moving towards that, boned meat is that there's growing difficulties with taking care of the waste products, the bones,
Absolutely.
And things like that. I think that there's more regulations than there's ever been for waste disposal services accepting that kind of product. And it just makes it really tricky, for a locker that's only accepting boned meat. They're just not really going to look at hush as viable.
Right. Well, it's interesting to hear you all say everything that you're saying there is the stuff that I've heard.
Yeah.
Meat lockers around here, they used to do it. I remember I went in at the beginning of a season how many years ago and just, hey man, just stopping, deer hunting's right around the corner here, 3 weeks away. You guys gonna be doing deer meat again? No, man, I ain't doing it. You're not doing it. Exactly what you said. It was in the peak of COVID. And he's like,
Yep.
he goes, do you know how much business I've got to do right now?
Yeah.
You know how behind we are on cows and on pigs? He's like, dude, he goes, I just don't need it.
Yeah.
I just don't need it. You know what I mean? He's like, and he avid hunter,
Right.
He's like, I just can't make it work. He's like, I'm just, and like, it's not paying enough. And this is paying so incredibly much. He's like, I just don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much truth there is in this. I've heard things that like the way that, and when it comes to the processing of it, it has to be done separately, right? Like you're not skinning a cow in the back, quartering it out, and then putting it on the table and boning it out, and then, let's just do a deer next, right? Like you've got to make sure it's all cleaned, and then they switch it over to deer, right? There's a whole process that goes into that. Well, that's costing a meat locker money too.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So yeah, I feel like I've definitely heard those things, that's just like, hey man, listen, and man, I know ribeyes in Clear Lake cost $16.99 for a thick cut. The other day I saw them at a grocery store for $19.99 for a thick cut ribeye.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's just getting expensive. I mean, I love me a good ribeye, but not for $20 a pound. I'm not walking out of there with a $34 steak. You know what I mean? Because I'm always the guy that's like, give me the thick one. You know what I mean? Don't give me one way in the back there. Like I want you to pick through and find the one that looks like I'm buying a library book. You know what I mean? Like that's what I want. You know what I mean? I want the thicken. Yeah, that sounded terrible, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, and we hear some other minor issues too, depending on the lockers. Unfortunately, this one is disappointing to hear, but a lot of lockers complain or basically express problems with the state that the deer are brought to them in.
Absolutely.
Right. So if hunters know that they're going to hush the deer, it seems like there's certain hunters that are taking worse care of the carcass, knowing they won't be eating the meat themselves. And that's disappointing. And it is very, it makes sense that would happen.
Yep.
But yeah, it's unfortunate. And I think it's reasonable then for lockers to take issue with the program if they're receiving deer that just aren't really in good condition, right? And those are supposed to be going to people in need.
Yeah. And again, I've heard that from people too, again, I don't mind saying it. I'm a big Elma meat locker guy. If you're ever in north central Iowa and you want to go to a meat locker that feels like it's straight from like 1995,
it's awesome.
You can walk in there and be like, I want a 28 ounce ribeye. Like they will pull it from the back and they will put it on the deal and they will cut you a ribeye that you literally just couldn't cook it up. You know what I mean? Like that place is awesome. I love that place.
Yeah.
I was in the other day and the guy called and he was talking about pork butts. And he's like, yeah, I can't do them at wholesale. I got to make some money on them, And the guy's like, and he goes, well, they're sold in pairs, So it's like, like he's trying to joke with the guy.
Yeah.
But like, it's just like kind of funny. Right? Because obviously pork butts are sold in pairs. But I love Elma Meat Locker.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of deer there for hush. Mm-hmm. And they have a really great system, which I think a lot of these and that's, I think, part of the kind of the tricky thing too is every meat locker that does hush kind of has their own policy and program, right? Mm-hmm. Elma, they have like a separate building for their coolers open 24/7, which is great because you get on hunting at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night this time of year, or, even after dark. And then I just drive over there.
Yeah.
I put it in there, but I'll be the first to tell you, I've walked into those coolers and some of those deer, you're like, yiska.
Yeah.
It's like, what'd you guys shoot these with, a machine gun? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Or you hear guys, I've heard guys say it before, well, I'm going to hush that deer, right? Gut shot deer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like they, it's just like it smells. You can see the green bile on the side and they're like, oh, we're going to hush it. And it's like, well, geez, that sucks. You know what I mean? Because again, it's going to be processed and then that goes and sits on the cooler floor for the evening into the next morning. They didn't spray it out or whatever, or get it cut up right away, and then all that just festers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, even Elmo Meat Locker, when I take deer meat in there that I'm going to have them process, that I take to my house, put it on the gambrel, and then debone it. I've gotten in the habit. I go to Walmart. You used to get them from Menards, but you can't get them from Menards anymore. You can buy 4 plastic containers. They're about this long and they're about this deep. And a deer will usually be about 3 containers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Depending on how really tight you cut it and if you have to cut anything out. And I take those containers, and those guys, every time I go, they're like, man, this is so perfect. I'm like, really appreciate you doing it. I'm like, yeah, no problem. I'm like, the containers are like $5. When you're done, just throw them away. And they literally told me last year, he goes, you wouldn't believe how many people bring deer meat in here in trash bags.
Yeah.
Jeez.
In trash bags. I'm like, in trash bags? And they finally had to make a policy that says, we will not accept deer in trash bags. It's like,
just
what
crazy.
is this coming to?
Yeah.
Right? And so we sit here and look at this and go, well, geez, why is there only 28 lockers when there's 99 counties? Like, why aren't there more people doing it? Well, because a lot of these guys, men and women that own these lockers, are having bad experiences most likely, right? And the juice just isn't worth the squeeze at the end of the day when it's like the going rate of what they can get for a deboned deer in Elma is, I think it is like $150.
Yeah.
If you take a whole deer in and they debone it for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the whole program is hunter funded. There's a $1 surcharge on all deer licenses that fund this program.
Yeah. So every tag that gets sold, $1 of it goes to the program automatically.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
So then within that cost for the Hush program too, because the Food Bank of Iowa, they have a cost too, right? Is it like $5 or $1 a deer that they get for the administrative stuff that they have to do and to get it distributed?
Yeah, they receive $5 from
Okay.
that fund for every deer that they distribute to the different, local, regional food shelters, food banks.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, you don't really usually think much about the Food Bank of Iowa. That's kind of cool that they're a part of it and the state's willing to, because again, there's a lot to do, right? Like it's not just enough just to go, okay, let's just go get the meat lockers, let's get it squared away.
Yeah.
You got to get the meat lockers, cut them all up, then you got to coordinate with whoever either. So how does that work? Do they coordinate with the state, or do they go directly to the Food Bank of Iowa and then the Food Bank of Iowa distributes it?
That I'm actually not positive about. I assume that the Food Bank of Iowa, and maybe not always, FBI, but they're affiliates as well, like different food bank programs would, I assume, take that meat and get it to where it needs to go. But I'm not quite sure about that. Okay. That's sometimes a complaint we hear, is that the Hush meat, they have to keep it in storage for a longer amount of time than they would prefer. And it eats up space, in their coolers or freezers or what have you. So I think that, that coordination is regional and local. Like it depends on where you're at. And I think different lockers have, different struggles and challenges across the state, and that's to be expected with state programs. I mean, it's, nobody's making money from it.
Right.
But nonetheless, even though we're losing enrollment to some degree, like you said, we're still talking about 500,000 meals every year going, staying in Iowa for people in need.
Right. Do you know how quickly deer would go from the field to the table? I mean, how quickly does that happen? Like if I were, youth season starts this weekend, all seasons come in, the bow season everybody's looking forward to is October 1st. If you killed it to October 1st, do you know how quickly before that, if you hushed it that day until it gets cut up and a family might see that meat?
It depends, but it could be very fast. It could be, within a week or two. It could be several months later.
Gotcha.
And I think that depends on the logistics situation within that locker and then the distribution network that the food banks manage.
Okay. Interesting. I know some of the research I was doing before this too talked about that the state of Iowa is not the only program that does this, right?
Yeah.
Minnesota has a program. Wisconsin has a program.
Yep.
We've just just Google searching, Pennsylvania has a program. There's a lot of states out there that have, I think Iowa's kind of got a cool name. Hush is a cool name.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's funny, I think a lot of people know about it. You know what I mean? I think it seems like what I hear too when we travel is a lot of non-residents, get excited about donating deer to Hush. A lot of non-residents, you're buying a doe tag.
Yeah.
So you hear a lot of guys that will donate they'll hush their doe that they kill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's pretty awesome. I found a list I found a list on your guys' website. Like I said, if anybody listening to this is interested, you can go to the Iowa DNR website, and there's on the deer hunting page of the Iowa DNR website. You can scroll down. There's all these different tabs, and about halfway down, there's a Hush program tab, and then you can read all about it. They have a listing of all the different meat lockers.
Yeah.
Again, it's funny because at this time of year, I'm usually looking at that just to be like, okay, what meat lockers are still doing it, or if I'm going to be somewhere else, if I, am in a position, if I can hush it, I will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we can put the link in the description too.
Yeah, absolutely. So think about that, dude. 100,000 deer donated, 15 million meals.
That's insane.
That's a lot.
It's awesome, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a year's worth of reported harvest,
Right.
all
Yeah.
going to people in need. So yeah, it really is a great program, and I think it's good optics for deer hunting in general.
Yep.
For people that don't interact with deer hunting and might have certain misconceptions, knowing that there's an avenue for that meat to go to people in need, I think is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, we're going to get to this in the later part of this discussion, but I am a big guy about the Hush program.
Yes.
I really, really, really like it.
Yeah.
That means a lot to me.
Yeah.
I'm a type of person, I'm a gift giver. That's how I am. I love to give gifts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a couple gifts in my office that I'm sending to buddies right now. A little gift that I got a couple weeks ago. It's so stupid. My buddy Ben, I sent him something. He goes, and he's like, my wife asked me, did you send me a gift? And I'm like, she's like, did Cole send you a gift? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, why did you do that? He's like, you know what I mean? I just like to give gifts. So,
Gift giver.
Yeah, I am. I really am. If you've ever read the book, 5 Love Languages, that's my love language. All right. That's my love language. I like to give gifts. Can't help it. Ask my wife.
Sue me.
Yeah, sue me. All right, so let's get into the next part of this. So we want to talk a little bit about Hush. Again, I think it's pretty cool. It's nice to kind of establish like this is how it works. This is the meat lockers that they have. The one thing that I'll say about with Hush too is I get to do some depredation hunting during the summertime. You got to be a little bit more careful about that because some of the Hush lockers aren't doing it until right when season starts.
Yeah.
I would just say, like, if you are getting to do some, even in September, like some lockers, they don't like, they're not getting a ton of deer in September, like even during youth seasons,
Yeah.
so they're turning their coolers on. They're having to keep them cool and they only might be getting a few Hush deer. So some of those meat lockers wait until October
Yeah.
to get started. Other meat lockers have coolers right outside that are almost just like a reefer, you know what I mean? And you can
Yeah.
just pull right up and throw it in. So, but again, the other thing to talk about, and Jace, you'll appreciate this, is a lot of the all the meat lockers do it. There's certain little paperwork that you have to fill out to make sure that you specify that you want the deer hushed. A lot of them ask you to give them a call the following day.
Yep.
Hey, Cole Tanner, dropped a big doe off in the thing that you can see my name on it. I want to hush that deer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, perfect. I think the other question to be answered about the Hush program, which I think is always a bit of a thing, is like, well, what about if I shoot a buck? Because like Jay said, you have to donate the whole deer.
Yeah.
So some guys like, well, I can't donate a buck to Hush. Well, you can. You can call the meat locker and say, hey, I brought in a buck. I want to hush it, but I really want that head off of it.
Yeah.
So those guys will be careful. Obviously, those guys are just getting a lot of deer. And it's not like there's a lot of guys that want deer mounted. So they know how to cut them the right way. And they cape them out, and then they just kind of lop them off at the neck
Right.
or the back of the head,
Yep.
and then you can just come in and get your buck. So don't think that if you shot a buck, it's only a doe program. You can take bucks in too, and they don't
Yeah.
mind, going back in there and getting your head. And it's obviously in a cooler, so it's not like you have to worry about anything slipping
Right.
with your hide and on your skull. You know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
a really cool thing too. Just
Yeah.
a little FYI. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is something that. It's funny, I didn't even know about this. There's a depredation biologist he doesn't work in this area anymore, but a guy named Ross Ellingson is a depredation biologist. And we were talking about the Hush program and just different things. And he said, hey, do you know about this deer exchange program? Heck, I never even heard about it.
Yeah.
So, Jace, tell us a little bit about what the deer exchange program is, how long it's been around, and just kind of the logistics of how that all works.
Definitely. So the Iowa Deer Exchange program is much newer than Hush. I couldn't give you the exact year, but it's, within the last several years. And it's sort of a response to, less locker involvement in Hush. And, there's only so much that we can do to continue encouraging lockers. We know that we're going to keep a contingent of lockers, hopefully into the future. And we've had fairly stable numbers, but the Iowa Deer Exchange program, it's not necessarily meant to replace Hush at all. It's just a complement to it. And it's sort of, what it is an online database where, either donors or recipients can sign up and provide some information about getting meat, in the right hands without using the program of Hush. So it's kind of a decentralized program where, hunters or donors, as they're considered in this program, will put their contact information and a pin on the map of where they're at, some specifics. And then there's much more people on the recipient side, usually non-hunters. Sometimes they're, elderly folks that used to hunt but aren't able to anymore and would still like some venison. So it's an opportunity for hunters to donate that meat to recipients and sort of handle, logistics between each other. So it's a partnership where, we facilitate the database and the program itself, but all actual meat donation is handled between the hunter and the recipient. So it's kind of a different program, but it gets at the same concept.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, I'm not a part of it yet. Like I said, I do so much on the Hush, and that works out pretty good for me. But, and we'll get to this in the later part of the discussion, but some of the depredation hunting I was doing this summer, I always try to line out who needs deer meat, right? And I was having a hard time finding a Hush locker that would be willing to take it during the summer because they don't have their coolers on.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden I'm like, well, geez, I have enough deer meat for me right now. And so I'm just like, I just don't want to just be killing deer to kill deer if I can't do something with the meat. So that I was really looking into the exchange program. It's like, well, I could just find somebody and call. It's actually pretty sweet when you go right on that Iowa DNR website, you go to the deer hunting page, halfway down the deer exchange program, there's actually, it's pretty awesome. There's an interactive map, a lot like the hunting atlas, right? And you just click on that. You can do it right from your cell phone too.
Yeah.
Which, suggestion, that would be a really cool thing to make more apparent and obvious. And maybe it is, but I couldn't find it on the Iowa DNR app.
It would.
Yeah,
it's not on there, but
yeah,
that would
because
be a cool
I
idea.
love the Iowa DNR app. That's been, you actually put some new icons on there, kind of like the new icons. But I'm on there all the time just because I'm a dork. But it would be really cool if it was on the app because I think more people would find it because it's kind of buried on the site, right? But once you get there, you can click on that map and it's pretty awesome. It pops it right up. The donors are in orange, or the donors are in blue, and donors are in orange, recipients are in blue, and it's pretty cool. Like there's some people around Clear Lake, Mason City, and it's pretty cool. It just has their name, their phone number, their email, whatever it might be, and then it has a little note section at the bottom where I read a couple of them. The one guy was like, he's like, I'll take anything you got. Yeah. Appreciate the program. Just came onto this. I would love to get some meat, and you can specify quartered, boned out, jerky, frozen, whatever. And some people may say, listen, like, let's just say, you're a grandma, and you're like, hey, listen, I don't have the ability to bone it out and everything else. I'd rather have boned out meat. You know what I mean? You can specify that.
Yeah.
And then when you would go on there and look, you could just find somebody that, hey, I've got the ability to cut it up in my garage, and I don't mind doing that.
Yeah.
So I could have it cut up, and then I could hold that person, say, hey, would you be willing to do this?
Yeah.
I think for me, what it could be really handy is, and I think what I might try this year just to try it, to become a part of it, is if I had an opportunity to shoot a deer, and I did, and I went on the app quick and I looked and found somebody in Clear Lake, Mason City, I would just call them.
Yeah.
Hey, I just shot a deer. I've got it in the back of my truck. Would you be interested? Actually, I just got one the other day. Or no, yeah, I'm 100% interested. Bring it over. Great. I got your address. On my way. Mm-hmm. And if they're like, no, and I tried to call somebody else and they were no, then I would, if I was going to keep for myself, then I would maybe just hush it.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
But it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is, and it's growing. I mean, it's, one of those things that like more awareness is just only going to help the program. But, we've had hundreds of recipients every year, willing recipients, and of course, much fewer willing donors. So yeah, the more hunters that are aware of this program, and it's an opportunity to, move meat into places where it might be better appreciated. Like I shoot a number of deer a year. And, around this time of year, I'm usually looking at my deep freezer, like, okay, what do I need to eat, before October, so I can get some, get some space there.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing that when I first heard about it, the thing that came to mind is I feel like there's always a struggle in bridging the gap between hunters and non-hunters. And I think when you initially say non-hunters, you think of somebody that doesn't like hunting.
Yeah.
That's not entirely the case.
Right.
I have the majority of all my family that are non-hunters. That doesn't mean that they don't like hunting. They
Right.
just don't hunt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so there's always this little bit of a separation, misunderstanding, animosity, resentment, just whatever you want to call it. But if we can figure out a way to bridge that gap, and I think that's what the Deer Exchange program allows you to do, is it's people that, and I'll tell you what, it does take, it takes a little bit of swallowing your pride to get on there and say, because some people are writing on there that they need help, right? They're looking for meat because they need food, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so that's pretty cool that they're willing to do that. And then, so I think it's nice too. I think it kind of like bridges that gap between hunters and non-hunters
Without a doubt.
in a way that I think that we all struggle with figuring out how to like find a common ground,
Yeah, and inflation has not been kind to meat
Right.
prices in the last few years. So, you're absolutely right that there's likely a lot of people that could certainly use that meat that might not be frequenting food banks, but you can still get at the same, you can do the same good deed just through the Iowa Deer Exchange without having to use the hush process. Maybe there's not a hush locker in your area, but there might be a half a dozen willing recipients in your county.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think the other thing that I think that when I sign up that I'm going to try to do is I'll probably just try to call a few of them and just touch base. Hey, I'm going to be doing a lot of hunting here in the month of October. Are you interested still? Are you looking for some? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, logistically, like, how are you thinking? Because I don't, if you want it all the way cut up and deboned, I can do that. Or, so, I think some people will just be like, I'll take it whole, man. I can do it. I got it,
Yeah.
So I think that's, part of it too, is I'll probably just call a few people and just touch base and see what I can figure out.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you said, you can go on the Iowa Deer website. It's easy to sign up. There's an email that you can email and they'll get you part of it. And then if you ever decided, you know what, the freezers are empty, I'm not involved anymore, you can always email and they'll take you off the list and get you off the map or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would be interested too to know if recipients ever contact donors. You know what I mean? Because you think about it where like the donor is going to contact a recipient, but it'd be really interesting to know if any of the recipients ever just, because it does show the donors in orange and there isn't actually, there was a lot in central Iowa. You know what I mean? I saw a lot like around Des Moines and southeast Iowa, but like around here, it was kind of few and far between.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It was only just a handful within like a 50-mile radius. You know?
Yep.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting to know if any of those recipients just contact donors.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Man, if I had a drum roll right now, I'm really excited about this part. I am. I am. I think listen, I love a good riff sesh.
That's exactly what this will be.
Yeah, this is what this is going to be. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about next. Again, we've covered the Hush program.
Yep.
Again, I think this is really important. We talked about this like a week or two ago, and I was like, and I'm giddy right now, if you can't tell. I was giddy about this discussion because I think the Hush program, I think the Deer Exchange program, I think it's really huge, right? I think it's huge because I think, and I'm standing on my soapbox when I say this, but I do believe that one represents all.
Yeah.
You follow me? I've told this story before. I'll never forget. I knocked on a guy's door. Hey, how you doing? Good. Hey, you allow any deer hunting? I see. Looks like you own some of this ground back here. I'll never let a bow hunter out here ever again. Oh, really? Why? Okay. And right away, he's like, you know what happened? I was like, oh, it sounds like you're going to tell me. He had a hunter shoot a cow, shot a cow with his bow. Okay. Yeah. I don't know how that happens. Then on top of it, he tried to cover it up.
Oh my
He tried to get rid of the cow, right? Like the farmer does not go out and count his cows, right?
Yeah.
But my point is like that guy he wouldn't matter if I was giving him money.
Yeah, exactly.
He wouldn't let me out there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and so we all represent each other,
Yeah.
right? When we do good things and when we do bad things.
Yep.
And I think that the Hush program, I think the Deer Exchange program is a really good thing. It's
Yeah.
a really good thing for all of us.
Yeah.
No, I think
definitely.
it represents the hunting community in a very good way. And I think it helps us do some good.
You're right.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what I want to get to now, this is more the riff sesh. This is more the opinion side. And I'm going to put out there what I want to say, and then I want to get your guys' feedback. And Jace, again, I understand if you just have to put on the DNR hat, but if you can give me your own personal opinion too, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, so as this discussion came about, and as this Hush podcast started to kind of come to fruition, I've been thinking about this a ton. And what I kind of came up with is that I started to really think about, and it really made me realize like how important the Hush program is, and why I started to really think about like, why do I hunt? What's the purpose for me going out there? Okay. Why do I hunt? Like, what's the real reason? Like, why do I really go? And it started to make me realize that I think for me, the reason that I hunt has kind of changed. We talked about a podcast about this like a year ago, about the different stages that hunters go through as they evolve kind of within your hunting career. You know what I mean? As your skill level increases and why you do what you do. First, a lot of guys just want to just get a deer.
Yeah.
Right. Then it's about getting a big one. Mm-hmm. Then it's about getting a lot of them.
Yeah.
Then it's more about the method than the prize.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it becomes about really, the next generation.
Yeah.
Does that make
Helping
sense?
others.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the philanthropy of hunting. Right.
Yeah.
And I realized that I think for me, what it really comes down to for me is my purpose really centers around the meat. It's really about the meat. That's why I really love to hunt, is because I love eating the meat. But I don't think for me it was always that way.
Right.
And I was telling you this today, I really started to think about like, well, when did it change? Because what I'm getting at is I think that for a lot of people, the meat isn't what they care about at all.
Yeah.
I think what they care about is the big buck, right? I think if you looked at it, I think there's really kind of, and I'll get into this further, but a lot of people don't really hunt for the meat. They just hunt for the enjoyment.
Right.
They just really hunt for the big buck.
Yeah.
Which in that regard, are you really hunting to go hunting? Or are you just hunting for killing?
Right.
Do you follow me? Because if we're just killing, and we don't care about the meat, and we're not doing anything with it, then what are we really doing?
Yeah.
It's just really for the pure enjoyment.
Right, right.
And for me, as a young man, like I'm 39 years old, I've been deer hunting since I was 12. From 12 to probably my early 20s, I think I hunted for pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
I hunted for just purely killing.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to say that. I really think I did. I just went because I just wanted to kill stuff. And I still do. I love killing deer. You of all people know, don't I?
Yes.
I mean, I've got a problem. I mean, I really enjoy it. I love the adrenaline rush. I love everything about it. I love the skill and the interaction and the intimacy of the situation. I love all of it. Mm-hmm. Like, I just love it. But I think for me, that changed when I was in college, when I was broke. There was a time, dude, I'll be the first to admit it, I was on food stamps, dude. I didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
I remember getting the card in the mail and going to the grocery store and feeling like super ashamed about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, honestly, almost makes me emotional right now because I didn't have anything, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but all of a sudden I realized that I was hunting because I needed food.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I went hunting because I wanted deer meat. Like, I wanted meat. And if I had deer meat, then I didn't have to use that stupid card.
Yeah.
It wasn't stupid. It was a really cool thing. And I'm glad I had it.
Yeah.
But I could eat the deer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was like all of a sudden, like this kind of flip kind of switched on like why I was hunting. And it became from that point forward, like all about the meat.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. And now I feel like I look at the way things are and I just wonder if like we're doing this all for the right reason.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
Do you follow me? Is it?
Yeah.
Because I think from my perspective, I think there's really kind of, for me, there's 3 reasons that I hunt in this order. I think I hunt for meat. I also think that I hunt based around and for the management, the depredation programs that I'm a part of, the hunting seasons that I abide by and the rules that I abide by. are because of the management, because I trust the state of Iowa and I trust the states that I go that they know what they're doing. And then I think it's for enjoyment.
Yeah.
Do you follow me?
Yeah.
You even asked me at lunch and you said, you're like, so you're telling me that and I told you, like this weekend, youth season comes in Saturday. And I luckily have right now, I know you've talked about wanting to take another deer, but I personally don't need any. The Hush, he said, I'm not opening my cooler yet. It's too hot. I'm not going to cool it down. Okay. So I was like, dang, I don't have a Hush locker to take it to. So I'm like, I need to call around to try to find one that will take it. And I literally told you, if I couldn't find a Hush locker, now I probably could do the deer exchange, but let's say I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find a Hush locker, I would probably look at my boy Jet and say, hey buddy, we're not going. And that would bury him. But I would look at him and say, Jet, we are not going to just go kill something to kill something. We're not just going to go kill it to kill it, man.
Yeah.
There's a bigger purpose that we're doing this.
Yeah.
We're doing it for the meat. And if we're not shooting it for the meat, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely.
And honestly, Jace, with all due respect to the Iowa DNR, sometimes I think the Iowa DNR has become a part of the problem. Because what do you hear people say? Well, I'll just hush it. I'll just hush it, man. You know, they don't care. They don't really want the deer meat to begin with. They just want to hush it.
Yeah.
So it becomes even more just about the deer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
well, I don't have to think about the deer meat. I'll just take it to my local meat locker, and all of a sudden they're getting deer that look like they've been shot with machine guns.
Yeah.
They get gut shot deer because people don't really care. They just want the rack.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
And so, I don't know. I guess I'm opening this to the floor. And because I think we had a kind of heated discussion about this, because like, I think that you hunt more for the enjoyment, you know?
Yeah.
And less about the meat.
Yeah.
And it's not that that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I just think that, like my little boy Jet, he's 7 years old, and I want him to hunt for the meat. When we go shoot deer, if I hush a deer that he shoots, man, he's all upset
Yeah.
because he wants to cut it up in the garage.
Yeah.
He wants to cook it inside.
Yeah.
That means a lot to him.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's the way that it is now
Yeah.
for most people. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes the Hush program kind of lends itself to that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Right.
In both directions. The Hush program is great for me
Yeah.
because I would donate 100 if I had the chance.
Yeah.
But I also think it lends itself to the guy that just hunts for the enjoyment that just goes, well, I'm just going to hush. I don't care about the meat anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like the big thing for me is like, yeah, I definitely hunt for enjoyment, but it's not necessarily just the enjoyment of taking an animal's life. I enjoy the camaraderie that it brings, doing it with buddies. I enjoy, the game that it is, learning the woods, being a better woodsman. I enjoy all of that part of it. I'm not just like, I don't care about anything else. I just like taking the life out of an animal.
Yeah.
I think that there's so much of it that I truly enjoy that just goes into hunting. It's not just the killing part that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And I don't take for granted the meat either. I mean, if I shoot a deer, I'm going to use the meat. That's a huge part of why I do it.
Mm-hmm.
But on that same note, I feel like I'm not going to go out and shoot 20 deer just to hush them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
But why not?
Well, I guess I don't even really know. I think it's more of the management thing. I just feel like I don't need to do that.
But the state of Iowa gives the doe tags. They give the doe tags because they think that number of deer could be killed and the herd could support it.
Right, I know, but it goes back to the fact that I don't enjoy the killing the deer that much, where I don't feel like I'd be satisfied just to go just kill a bunch of deer, because that's not the main reason that I'm doing it, is just the killing part. Like, I would feel a lot better if I fill my tag and I can go and have a beautiful morning watching deer and just seeing them live and be out in nature. That would give me more enjoyment than just shooting the first deer that walks by.
This is such an interesting conversation because I was on the phone with my best friend last night, and it was a completely parallel discussion. Like, couldn't be more similar.
Yeah.
To the points you guys are bringing up. So me and my buddy both target mature bucks primarily, but we diverge in that I typically harvest 1, 2, maybe 3 does a year as well, because I love to eat venison, and I usually eat by myself 3 or 4 deer a year.
Wow.
He has not harvested a deer in like 10 years because he is really only focused on achieving a very difficult goal where he hunts of shooting a large mature buck.
Yeah.
And all of the, it enjoys that game, that strategy. But he has a lot of opportunities to kill other deer if he wanted.
Yeah.
And so I think if it was just about the aspect of killing, like I don't know that I completely agree with what you're saying, Cole, or maybe I'm just not understanding it correctly. But when you say that, a lot of hunters are just motivated by the killing, I think that it's not necessarily, like you said, Nick, taking an animal's life, but rather the success that it represents in a very difficult thing to do, and being able to participate in the most natural process there is, which is being a predator on Earth.
Yeah.
Something that we've evolved to want to do, and so is every other species, in some form. So I think it's okay to not be completely motivated by meat or not have that be your primary motivation. I think what would be troubling is if there's a large number of hunters that have complete disregard for the resource, which I don't think is true. I think that it might be a more secondary motivation. A lot of hunters prefer beef to deer, and they have all the opportunity to eat beef, but choose to continue to hunt and harvest venison and eat venison as a part of, being engaged in that process. Even if that's not their primary motivation, I think it's, and then in terms of hush, I think that hushes really can only be utilized in a good way, right? I think like what's not good is if somebody mishandles a carcass and brings in spoiled meat or something like that. Like probably a very minor fraction of the people involved in the program in general.
Yep.
But to your point, Cole, we do need deer harvested everywhere in the state to some degree. And in fact, there's parts in the state where we could sustain more harvest. And if that's done, if that's facilitated through hush, if we've saturated the demand for hunters putting meat in the freezer and we still need more deer harvested, then hush and the Iowa Deer Exchange program are the avenues to accomplish those management goals, or at least help facilitate more deer being harvested on the landscape, despite hunters maybe not having a need for that meat themselves. So I would say if somebody is motivated purely by, shooting deer in order to hush them, I think that that's inherently a good thing, even if that's not the first reaction, because I think you're still putting that meat in front of people that have a very high need for it. You're putting clean, healthy protein in families in need in Iowa. And I think that's a lot better than letting steaks get freezer burned to the bottom of a freezer, which of course is unfortunately something that happens in some cases, but at least it's not wanton waste.
Yeah. No, and like I said, Nick, you know this about me. I'll play devil's advocate and like argue both sides of it, right?
No, yeah.
And like I said, that's where for me it comes down to, like I said, those three kind of main points: enjoyment, management, and meat.
Yeah.
Because if it's just all about enjoyment, then, and that's the main goal, that turns into poaching, right? Yeah. Because you're not worried about the management. You're not worried about the season dates. You're not worried about property and private property and trespassing. And there's guys that do that just go, I don't care. That's the buck I want. I don't care if I got to drive through the field or do whatever I got to do. I'm going to do what I got to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so if it's all about just enjoyment, then they just disregard the other two.
Right.
I guess I just feel like and again, I stand on my soapbox when I say some of this stuff, but I just kind of feel like, especially in what we do, when you go, and again, you go to the Iowa Deer Classic, it's not called the Iowa Deer Processing Classic, right?
Yeah,
I get it. Like, nobody's like, man, look at that round steak. You know what I mean? Like, I get it, right? But you know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel like there's a lot of guys out there that are just hunting for the buck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you don't, and the meat kind of just becomes like an afterthought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And to your point too, Jace, I think what you said, and that's one of the things, like when you read on the Iowa Deer website about the Hush program, it talks about that, hey, this is a great opportunity. If you fill your buck tag, there's opportunity to still help on the management side of things and help take some of these antlerless deer, these does, off of the landscape and help the resource, but still have an avenue to get that meat into the right hands.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like that's just, I'm like, for me being meat and then management, I'm like, heck yeah, that's right up my alley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make
No,
sense?
definitely. Yeah.
You know, but, and again, to what you said earlier, you know, Jace, too, about the history, that was kind of that's what I started thinking back about. Because if you look at, like, for example, state of Iowa, right? State of Iowa has had deer seasons since the 1950s. The
Yep.
state of Iowa was really started to be explored and settled, not by just Native Americans, right? By Lewis and Clark and everybody coming across in the 1820s, 30s, 40s,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then sometime between, let's just say 1850 and 1950, the deer population was obviously booming at some point.
Yeah.
And then it went down, and then it kind of came back up, and they said, okay, there's a manageable herd of deer again. You follow me?
Yeah.
And so then then I kind of kept going through the process. I'm like, okay, well, again, from just my thought process sake, I'm like, well, when did it become not about the meat?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think it's really about the meat. If you were to take it by a percentage, 0 to 100, how many people are just out there with the focus being meat? I think it's a lower percentage. The higher percentage is enjoyment. So our generation is about enjoyment. Our moms and dads' generation was probably about enjoyment. Our grandparents' generation was about enjoyment. That takes us to what, the 1920s, 30s? So our great-grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, you know, when did it all of a sudden shift?
Yeah.
You know, where it was about the food, and then it became more about like the sport, and it came more about like what you're describing. And believe me, I love that too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I shot a recurve for a long time and just called myself a nature watcher because I didn't kill hardly any deer.
Yeah.
Because it was a 20 and under type deal.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so there was a lot of sunrises and sunsets where I just sat there and looked at the beautiful because I wasn't going to kill a deer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I get that part of it too. But when
Yeah.
did it all shift? You know, and I just hope this discussion just makes somebody listen to this maybe think about it, because I
Yeah.
just don't want to get where we get so far off of about eating it too, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
it just becomes so solely focused on just that big mature buck, you know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're there. I mean, when we did that Iowa deer hunter survey and asked people what their primary motivating factor is for deer hunting in Iowa, the most popular option was meat. So
That's good to hear.
30% of respondents said that they are primarily motivated by meat.
Jackpot.
Yeah.
You know, the next biggest motivation was recreation, which is exactly what you're getting at. It's a incredible, like, I mean, I agree with the rest of you guys. It is the most fun thing that I could imagine doing. And I absolutely love deer hunting for the recreational aspect. And I wasn't always as meat motivated as I am today. I went through a similar process like you, Cole, and I think almost every hunter probably does, especially when you're, you know, high school, college age perhaps, and you kind of, you know, in high school, most people don't really worry about food.
Yeah.
And when I was shooting deer in junior high school, I wasn't really concerned about how that meat was getting used. I was a 17-year-old kid, and I was just happy to be successful harvesting a deer.
Yep.
And I just assumed that my family would eat it. And
Yeah.
we did, I guess, but probably gave a lot of it to friends and other family too. And because I don't remember having venison as often as I do now
Right.
as an adult. And I think that that's a normal process to go through. And I think it just speaks to priorities, natural priorities at different times in your life. And I think a lot of like adult onset hunters that I talk to, people who haven't hunted as a child, teenager, young adult, you know, haven't had any exposure to it. I think by far the most common motivation for folks that are adults getting into hunting is, you know, putting clean protein on their plate and their family's plates. So I think that it's like you said, maybe a more, for lack of a better term, mature motivation. Like as people tend to move through the process, that becomes but that isn't to put that motivation above the recreation of it, because I mean, I'd be lying if I said that, you know, I don't target mature bucks for the meat. It's not necessarily, you might get a higher meat yield, but I don't have to tell you guys that a 1-year-old doe backstrap is, you know, a little tastier than coming off of a 6.5-year-old buck in November.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm completely, I think like I would assume that there's a lot of hunters, like you said, that are more motivated by the trophy aspect or the recreation, than meat, but I think meat is almost always part of it. And when I was having this conversation yesterday, I asked my buddy, like, how would you feel if you got your buck out to the parking lot, let's say he was successful, which is usually a long shot, but he,
No, let me just get, is your buddy the guy that like can't hunt his way out of a paper bag? Is that the problem, or what's the problem?
he's a very good hunter.
Super picky, huh?
He's very good. He's very good at getting on the deer.
He's probably a really nice guy. I'm sorry if he happens to listen to this. You're probably super cool. Sorry, dude. I didn't mean to blow you up.
He's not that nice. He's really good at getting on the deer, less good at executing, I would say. And he would agree. He would have to agree. But so I said, like, hypothetical situation. You shoot the buck of your dreams. You get it pulled out to the parking lot, and someone pulls up to you and says, hey, what do you say you cut the head off of that, and I'll take the carcass. You just go home with the head. Like, how would you feel about that?
Right.
It's like, I think most people would be a little apprehensive and say, like, yeah, I don't know, like, no, I'll keep it. Like, even if they're not, during that drag out, they're probably not dreaming of the pot roast they're going to make.
Yeah.
But there's still something about the completion, like completing the cycle of a hunt that involves consuming it. And I think if you miss that and it doesn't end up with, like, going to somebody in need or somebody that just doesn't have the ability to procure their own venison or the interest even, I think most people would, find that to be kind of an incomplete cycle and maybe not have the feeling of reward at the end, I would assume.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, if you shot your deer and didn't find it for 2 weeks and all you could salvage was the skull, I feel like most people would be upset by that.
100%.
Even if they didn't shoot that deer primarily to put in the freezer, I think that would still make people upset.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and I had that experience last summer during the depredation season.
Oh, yeah.
I shot that buck in the summer and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
I couldn't find it. And we looked and looked and looked, and it was just eating me alive.
Yeah.
We went out there, a week or two later. We were walking back to the truck after the hunt was over, and man, you could smell him right away.
Yeah.
I stopped and I said, he's over there somewhere. Let's go.
Yeah.
Drop off this, as Nick would say, calls it a coulee. Hey, down that coulee. I call it a ravine. That's just a Wisconsin, Iowa difference. So we drop off this little ravine, go back up the other side. We start kind of like spreading out, and sure enough, there it was.
Yeah.
And there was nothing but a brown pile of maggots and a set of horns.
Yeah.
And that just made me sick.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah.
And with the depredation program, you take the heads. If they are bucks, you take them to the office, one of the offices, and they do what they do. I'm not sure what they do with them. I think they probably burn them or something.
Yeah.
But I just am like, how this sucks.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing left.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, literally, you pick the head up, and like the last bit of the fur just came off his head. It was so terrible.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it happened opening day too last year.
Yeah.
With that doe, and it was crazy too, because I mean, it wasn't too much longer. I mean, it was the next morning, but it was still just
thought we hit her a little high in the shoulder.
Yeah,
we trailed blood. We're like, let's just back out. We'll come in right away in the morning. Came in the morning, and coyotes had already got her.
Found her right away, but
like
it was
literally like less than 100 yards from where we stopped. But still, it was the right thing to do to back out.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like he said, like it was definitely a really kind of bittersweet, more so bitter feeling for sure.
Well, and I really appreciate what you're saying, Jace. Like, and that was one thing that Nick asked me. He was like, I got a heater of a question for you, and you're keeping me in check, right? Because you're like, there was an example last year in first part of November. We're sitting on an edge, and there's a cut bean field, and then just a strip of cut corn. We could put the video in here.
Yeah.
And this buck comes around the corner, and he was like a 2.5-year-old, maybe a 1.5-year-old. Talking to Jace, he was probably a 1.5-year-old, because it sounds like all these 1.5s are just,
I know,
which is like feels like I have a whole new perspective on 1.5-year-old deer.
Yeah.
But he comes walking around the corner, and Nick's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I'm like, oh. But he wasn't mature in any way, shape, or form, and I passed him.
Yeah.
And now Nick's like, well, if it's just about the meat, why'd you pass the deer?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm not 100.0% hunting just for the meat, right?
Right.
I want to shoot a mature deer too. But then my also thought process is like, well, if I'm trying to shoot him, I really want to shoot for meat. But if I'm going to shoot a buck, I'd rather it be mature and let the other one just kind of walk and get mature. Because if it's just about if it's about the meat, I don't really need the rack. Like, so I'll just shoot a doe.
Right.
Indo facto, same thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need the horns of this, like, in my garage or in my house.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's another thought experiment. You know, it's like if you're, and anybody who's lost a deer could relate to this feeling, right? But it's such a complicated thing to describe, especially to non-hunters, like the excitement around harvesting a deer.
Yeah.
I really truly believe that the excitement is not, I just destroyed a life, I just took a life.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the excitement is something that's very difficult to do and took a lot of, a long process and a lot of work and woodsmanship came to fruition, and I executed successfully, and that's what I came here to do. But it's not like, yeah, that deer's not going to take another step, It's a different thing, but it looks like that perhaps to people who aren't involved in hunting, and it makes sense why it does. But so back to the thought experiment, like anybody that's know that they've mortally wounded a deer and lost it can hopefully relate to that, like pit in your stomach, like terrible feeling, one of the worst feelings.
Yeah.
I get more excited than anybody when I shoot a deer, and I would say that I love shooting deer, but I don't love the killing part of it. But it's difficult to describe.
I think I get what you're saying, and I don't mean to make it sound like all I want to do is just kill stuff.
Right. No.
You know what I mean? Because I love everything you're describing, right?
Yes.
It all comes in the culmination of when you let that arrow go.
Yeah.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
And I know you're describing exactly how I feel about it, probably how Nick does, probably how almost every hunter listening.
Yeah.
That it's easy to sum up and say, like, I love killing deer, and I would absolutely agree, but I don't love the killing, but it wouldn't be obvious to me that I don't if when I know that I've mortally wounded a deer but been unable to recover it. Oh. It's like a terrible feeling that I think about when I'm trying to sleep. Like it just ruins your whole day and feels, I feel guilty and I feel remorseful and sad, and I don't feel any of those things when I recover a deer I shot at all. Like some people talk about how it's a mixed emotion when they harvest a deer, and I've never really felt that way.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't feel mixed emotions. I feel awesome.
I'm only excited. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've also come to terms with what hunting means to me and how it relates to my lifestyle and how it relates to the natural world and being able to participate in an actual food system instead of, whatever we do in society in general. So it all makes perfect sense to me more than almost anything else in life. And I feel like I've come to terms with that. But the mixed emotions, like I've also had like a pit of despair in my stomach when I've lost deer, because I felt like I ended a life for no reason ultimately because I didn't find the deer. Completely accidental, of course, like it always is, and it just happens. It's an inherent part, unfortunately, of the process. But that's always when I think about this, how I kind of justify things in my head. It's like, well, I know that if I were to shoot a big buck, maybe I know I killed it, and maybe one day I could find its skull. I wouldn't be happy about that anywhere near if I, found the deer after executing a good shot.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I love what you're saying there. And I think what you said earlier ties right in with that as well, as the fact of, and I've never really thought about that way, as when we're out there hunting, it is this process that kind of goes through these different steps. And part of it starts in the summer and setting out trail cams, and you really, really love that part.
Yeah.
Right? You probably love that part just as much as you do as getting in the stand.
Yeah.
And being out there and starting the hunting.
Yeah.
And then there's the harvesting and actually making the shot. And then there's the recovery. Mm-hmm. And then there's the field dressing and respecting the animal and doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And then there's getting it in the truck and then getting it home. But if we only get to the shot and we don't complete all the rest of this, it does feel very incomplete.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Hence, when you wound something and you don't recover it, it's just like you're in the middle of the song, but you didn't finish it. You're just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's really.
At least,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, buddy.
I was going to say that, at the very least, when I've been in that situation of losing a deer, nothing goes to waste in nature. Yeah. Unless that deer launched itself into a dumpster before dying,
Yeah.
its nutrients will be absorbed in some fashion.
Yep.
And it'll, melt back into the ground and contribute back into, like, it'll complete its own cycle.
Yeah.
But as a hunter, it just feels like, okay, now what? Like that, and then it's like this weird feeling that you have to kind of swallow of, well, I'll get back in the stand and try again. And no predator has 100% success rate. And, I would argue that we probably have a much lower wounding loss than, other natural predators on the landscape.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, like I said, this conversation is really encouraging for me because, like you said, I think sometimes in this whole hunting space, right, there's always this, again, I hate to sound like a not nice person, but I don't really care. I only really try to worry about myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a pretty private guy for the most part, I guess. You know what I mean? With all due respect to anybody and everybody in this conversation, I don't really care what you think that much.
Yeah.
Really care about what my wife thinks and my kids think and like my close family members. Maybe you a little bit, just a little bit, not very much so.
Let's go.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
No, 100%.
But I think sometimes in this whole hunting thing and all of this, what we all see and how we ingest information on a day-to-day basis, you see all of it, and it's hard not to kind of compare.
Yeah.
It's hard not to go, well, what am I doing compared to that person or whatever?
Yeah.
And you just have to, I think at the end of the day, like you just have to stay really true to yourself. And I think what you said, Jace, you're like, and I feel this way too. I know who I am.
Yeah.
I know why I do what I do. And I'm just going to keep being who I am and true to myself. And
Yeah.
if that means, and like your buddy, God bless him, right? If he's okay with going 10, 12 years, and it hasn't been that long since I've shot a buck, but it's getting close to that
Yeah.
I've shot a real nice mature deer.
Right.
And there may be people that look at me and be like, well, he's just not a very good deer. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just not very good at it. Like, I don't know. Or I'm just, I'm okay with shooting does.
Yeah.
And I would just love to shoot the absolute mamba jamba.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And wait maybe the rest of my life for that to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly.
But I just know who I am and I'm just true to myself. And I think that's the way we all are
Without a doubt.
when it comes to this whole thing.
No, 100%.
And I think that you can talk about meat and trophy in the same sentence.
Yeah.
And I think that most people have some component of both in
Yeah.
what brings them out into the woods, into the tree stand. And I think it's awesome that trophy hunting is what it is. And by that, I just mean, trophy hunting can take different meanings, but by no way am I saying, only motivated by antlers, skull capping the deer in the field and letting it sit. I mean, that is, as you mentioned, poaching and represents like the worst actors,
Yep.
in the system. But come November, like I am not thinking about does. I'm not thinking about yearlings, 2.5-year-old bucks. Like I'm out there to shoot a big buck, and it's probably not going to happen every year for me, but I'm there for the challenge and the experience and just getting to be a part of that time of year. And I think that's all okay. Like I could shoot 4 or 5 does before November starts feasibly and then not have to hunt in November.
Right.
But I don't want to do that. I'm always going to leave room for a buck in November because I want to have a chance at shooting a big mature buck, and I think that that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But I think that there's sometimes you hear in this conversation people like maligning trophy hunting, like it's not a real part of hunting. But
Right.
I think we need to be honest with ourselves that it is what dominates. It is what dominates the whitetail world. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people, there isn't 100,000 non-residents waiting to hunt in Iowa for our does because our meat tastes better, even though it might. I think that it's pretty obvious, what another major primary factor is, and it's I think totally fine. I think it's good, if anything.
No, dude, I absolutely agree. And again, I apologize if I'm coming across like I'm like, if you're trophy hunting, it's bad, because I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah.
Because I
I don't think you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
But
No.
but Jace, you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Zip and Benny,
Yeah.
right? They drew late Muzz tags
Yep.
for Iowa, and they are so excited to be in, what are we in, zone 10,
Zone 10. Yep.
right? Last couple weeks in
Yeah.
December, first week in January, baby. Or the season's a little bit different now, but
Yeah.
roughly then.
Yeah.
They're here and they're ready to just have an opportunity to be in Iowa and you just never know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And that's totally fine. And like you said, there's 6,000 non-residents every year, a good majority of that being bow hunters that are out there with that dream, and they're holding that bow and thinking, you never know.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yep. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Hey, okay. Hey, I think we put a button on that.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. Jace, I really, really appreciate your just candor about that. Seriously, dude, I can't tell you how much, because I think this really kind of ties it all together.
Yeah.
And I think I really tried to pin you down about the hush thing, and you really handled that like a pro. Yeah. I thought, man, he's always so nice. I thought maybe I'm going to get him mad. I can't even get him mad. Golly, he was just like cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so one other question I have. I was thinking about this earlier. So you're the deer management guy for the state of Iowa. Being in the position that you are, two-part question. Do you guys, I'm going to call them your minions. You probably don't have minions, but I just think minions is a funny word. The Iowa DNR management group, your department, do you guys first question, do you have a tab on big bucks that are out there? Do you get tips from outfitters or hunters, or when your guys are out and techs see you guys are out there, right? Like you see there's a 220-inch whitetail. And do you guys know about the big deer that are out there? That's my first question. And then my second question is, when big deer start getting harvested, do you guys hear about that? Do you guys try to kind of keep an inventory of what's being shot? Or if a really big deer gets shot, are they investigated, or do you look into them? Or do you just kind of get to the end of the year and go to the Iowa Deer Classic and go, wow, man, a guy shot a 280. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how much of the pulse do you guys have on what's going on? So I know if I can call you mid-October and ask how it's going. No, I'm just kidding. But so how much do you know? You know what I mean? Like when it comes to that stuff.
So I myself, unfortunately, know almost none of that information, because I live in Ames and I work in Boone.
Yeah.
And I do my own deer scouting and try to find nice bucks, but I'm not working in the field. The time I spend outdoors is in my spare time, my off hours. Now our management section, our field biologists and technicians definitely know, probably in every case, of some nice bucks hanging around certain places on public land. And, we'll receive reports like if people are reporting like a massive buck in Des Moines, which tends to happen a lot actually. Okay. We'll receive word of that one way or another. And then if there's like suspect bucks that are taken, sometimes, well, almost always, if there's a 200-inch buck, a lot of people know about it. There's probably a lot of people with pictures of it. And sometimes those bucks are harvested in suspicious ways, in which case our conservation officers tend to investigate and usually get down to the bottom of what happened. So maybe a deer is shot in a city park that doesn't allow hunting, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But that's not something that I deal with really at all. In terms of keeping an inventory of big bucks, there's another tab on our deer hunting website that you might have seen where you can report trophy bucks, basically. So there's Iowa.
Dick is going to be freaking out about this. I can see he's already pulling his phone right now and trying to find it.
The state of Iowa, we have our own, they roughly correspond to Boone and Crockett stuff. I think actually our archery record, to qualify to have an archery record buck, I believe it's actually a higher net score than Boone and Crockett, but I believe that we have the same rifle, or Pope and Young, I should say, and then we have the same Boone and Crockett score. But we keep our own. We allow people to submit records if they want, and all they have to identify is the county that they shot them in.
Interesting.
Now we don't really get very many people doing that.
Is that that's on the deer tab, the deer hunting tab?
Yeah.
Can you find that?
Yep. And it's, to be honest, I don't even know if there's recent years on there because we don't really get people doing that. It used to be a pretty big thing, but I think that was before social media kind of took over as a way to, it's its own brag board now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is great. And frankly, it's not. So then we also have people that submit to Boone and Crockett, right, or Pope and Young, and they keep their own record books. And actually, there's a ton of benefit to population management and conservation in doing so, because when you have a lot of record book bucks come out of a certain area, then you know that the habitat can support, right? You know that there's an abundance of resources in that area, or else those secondary sexual characteristics, antlers, wouldn't be growing so big.
Right, absolutely. Interesting.
For so many deer. So there is actually a lot of utility in reporting, or submitting your record book bucks, either to us or Boone and Crockett, Pope and Young. But I'll be honest, it's not something that I spend any amount of time looking at. We have a really good grasp on what counties produce the biggest bucks, and it's usually the counties with the most habitat in every case.
Yeah,
So
it's
Super
interesting.
interesting. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Because you would think that, just hypothetically, if there was just, like I said, I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer, but let's say EHD and CWD really takes a toll, and everything just goes straight down to negative town.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there are just less deer being harvested. All of a sudden, maybe some of that big buck information could be more valuable, right? Because it sounds like you guys have you guys have your management strategy, and if it's not broke, why fix it, right? You do a pretty good job, and the big bucks that are being shot are just kind of the consequence of good management, right? And so it's you don't really need to know there was this many bucks over 180, or there was a 220, or blah, 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 blah. That mature whitetails are going to just be because of the good management and because of the good habitat.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. More data is always better. If we had more people submitting those record book bucks, we'd have more information that could be useful at one point in time.
Yeah.
But to me, it's a losing battle. It's just not something. If I didn't work for the DNR and I shot a 180-inch buck, my mind would not go to I want to let the DNR know about this because maybe it'd be valuable data for them. I don't think. But there's the Bucks of Iowa page.
Yeah.
Which for any listeners,
they do a great job.
We have a lot of conservation officers that monitor that page.
Oh, I bet.
I bet.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep. And it can be pretty fruitful for some of those situations.
You're always saying that, hey, they posted a Cerro Gordo buck the other day.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, that's gotten really, really popular.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, and that's a bad thing too. I think, and again, I would assume the conservation officers and or the Iowa DNR sees this all the time when there's videos posted.
Yeah.
And then you're like, that was illegal. You know what I mean? And then they put it on, and then they've got it on video.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. So there's all the proof we need.
Yeah.
Right.
Sign here, type
exactly.
deal. Which I guess.
Yeah. I got a quick question that's way off topic, but has there been many cases of VHD and CWD lately? Or
so our CWD sampling season hasn't really started yet because most of the deer we sample are hunter harvested.
Correct. Yep.
But we have actually, unfortunately, found a couple clinical deer recently, which means that they're showing physical signs.
Okay.
They're in the end stage of the disease, and those were, I think, 2 deer in Appanoose County. Now, it's kind of bad news when we find clinical deer because it's very uncommon to find clinical deer, especially more than one, when the disease has a very low prevalence rate, if that makes sense. If it's
what does clinical deer mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that just means think of physical symptoms, physical signs.
Okay.
So because CWD positive deer don't show any physical signs, they don't have any health problems for 18 to 36 months after becoming infected, they're in a subclinical stage.
Okay.
So it means that they're infected, but they're not showing any signs. They're not clinical. Once they're clinical, that's when you would see, emaciation, drooling, odd behavior, things like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's really rare to find. And usually when you find it, it's indicative of a bad situation. That's not great news, but we knew that it was in Appanoose. We knew that Wayne County is a hotbed, unfortunately, and Appanoose is right next door. So that being said, we've only found a number of clinical deer in the last 12 years that we've known of the disease on the landscape. Probably going to become more common as time goes on, unfortunately. But there was, I think we might have talked about it in the last podcast, 8 counties last year that detected it for the first time.
Yep.
Just being completely realistic, we're going to find it hopefully not, but probably in that many or more this year. And I sure hope that I'm wrong about that.
Yeah.
EHD seems to be pretty mild, pretty average here this year by all counts. And so there's a new EHD reporting tool that we developed where hunters or anyone from the public that finds EHD related mortalities. So basically what that means is deer carcasses in or near water this time of year. 99% of the time is going to be related to hemorrhagic disease, either blue tongue or EHD. And that's now a tool that we've been trying to raise awareness of, that hunters, landowners, anybody can submit their own reports to that, and they get automatically fed into a dashboard that's also public. And both of those tools are on our Iowa DNR deer hunting website and a couple other places, but that's the easiest way to find it. And so I monitor that dashboard every day.
Yeah.
We are finding more carcasses. I think that we're up to around 150, 160 carcasses in the state, which is shaping up to be a pretty average year for the last decade. Last year, we found we had about 2,000 reported.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we end at around 200 this year. That would be pretty middle of the road.
That'd be awesome.
It seems like most of the disease activity is like it usually is in southern Iowa.
Yep.
I don't think we've had any reports in your neck of the woods, but northeast Iowa has had a couple rather serious outbreaks of over a dozen deer, Black Hawk and Dubuque County specifically. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll find out. The thing is at this point last year, we thought we were in a mild year.
And
then we had a very hot fall. We didn't get any frosts really at all in October. And to be honest, it's looking pretty similar this year.
Yeah.
We might have a lot more to talk about in a couple months, but as of now, with the information we have, it seems like it's mild. But for any hunters listening that find mortalities, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to report those, because that's our department's only way of managing for the disease, reacting to mortalities,
Yep.
And allowing the best management to occur for the deer in your county. So,
Got it.
we absolutely encourage anybody to submit those reports.
And can you also access that on the app, or is that just on the website?
No, and I've been hearing a lot of people wanting it to be on the app. I think it'd be awesome, and it's something
Yeah.
that I'm going to look into. We just launched these tools in July.
Okay.
So hopefully that'll be a next step if it's feasible. But, I'd probably be kidding myself if I thought I'd be able to add too many deer-related tools onto
Yeah.
the DNR's app.
Yeah.
But I think this would be an important one.
Yeah.
So-
Well, and even from my perspective with the app, even if it was just a hyperlink that took you from the
Yes.
app to the website,
Yeah.
because I'm looking at the app just because that's how I am, and sometimes it keeps you on the app, and then sometimes it looks just like the Iowa DNR
Yeah.
website.
Yeah.
So if you could just make it so it just hyperlinked back to the website,
Yeah.
at least people would know about it. Because like you said, I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but feels like a lot. I know I really love the app.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go look up IowaDNR.com. Just open the app.
Yeah, exactly.
I can do my harvest reporting. I can look at quotas.
Yeah.
I can buy purchase tags with that. Just hyperlinks right to the website.
Yep.
So it's like that works pretty dang slick. I love that. But
For
yeah,
sure.
if you're listening to this, get on the Iowa DNR app. We can put a link in the description on the YouTube post and on the
Yep.
website that will show where you can maybe find that, because
Yep.
I think that is really, really important.
Definitely.
For sure.
Interesting.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, I feel like we're really, I'm switch gears on you. I feel like we really missed an opportunity.
What?
Where were we 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday night?
2 weeks ago, Wednesday night.
Yeah, I can't believe you already forgot. Boone.
Oh, yeah,
Boone.
Boone.
Boone Super Nash. We were at Boone Super Nash.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Boone Super Nationals.
Yep.
Could have called Jace. Could
Yeah, we
have come
should've.
to the races.
Yeah.
Drove
Yeah.
down there. We were listen, I wanted to stay till 3:30 in the morning, but Ding Dong over here was tired at 1, so we had to drive home.
We had to work the next
Golly.
morning.
You don't have to sleep when it's Boone Super Nationals. You just sleep in the truck, and then you just get up and go.
Yeah.
Do it all over again.
Yeah.
Do you ever go to dirt track races? You like dirt track races? If you haven't gone, we'll take you.
I haven't, but I'd love to go.
Oh, man, dude, I love dirt track races.
We'll have to give him a call next year.
Listen, yes, plan on it the week after Labor Day
Oh, yeah.
on either Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday night, because those are the big
Yeah.
mod nights.
Yeah.
We're doing the old Boone Super Nationals.
No, and it's super cool. I'm not too into dirt track racing, not as much as Cole, and it's still really something to see. It's
Sweet.
super cool. Yeah.
Oh, but you'll laugh at this. Jace, we were at Boone Super Nationals, and I looked at Nick while we were at the races, and I said, you know the best part about this is? And he's like, what? And I go, there's a 200-inch whitetail that can hear these race cars while we're standing here. I'm like, because if he's down off to the west, down that big ravine in the Des Moines River, I said, I guarantee you there's a 200-inch deer down there somewhere that's listening to these cars just blowing around out here.
Hey, that's where I hunt, so I'm going to ask you to cut that out of the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say, it is a beautiful area down there.
Oh, I love it.
It's so cool.
Okay,
Yeah.
one last thing I want to say. Since you hunt that area, you have to go find this spot because this is where I've told you a story.
Yep.
Okay, so if you get should we end the podcast? I say this off the record.
Yeah.
We'll say this off the record. We'll say this off the record. I don't want to blow anybody up.
Yeah.
I'm blowing anybody up. But we'll end it, and then I'm gonna tell Jace this.
Yep.
Sorry, everyone. Can't let you hear this. This is private.
Yeah.
Hey, podcast of the books. Ozonics Killerwinds. Thanks, Jace, for being on. I really, really appreciate it, dude.
Yep. Thank you.
Good
Anytime.
job, Nick.
Thanks.
Appreciate all the information. Like I said, check out Hush. Check out the exchange program. We'll have links on this. You know, if you're looking to report EHD, all that's super important. And like I said, it's right around the corner, man. The countdown is on.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, over and out.
See you next time.
Stay classy.